Hello, and thank you for joining us on today's episode of Life After This, a show dedicated to helping you grow and transform your business. I'm your host, Andrea Cadelli, and I am passionate about helping leaders succeed by effectively managing change within their organization. As a leader, you're already aware of the critical nature of change in today's fast and ever-evolving market. So in each episode of the show, I will be speaking with transformational thought leaders and business owners to better understand how we can innovate, grow our business, and manage organizational change. My first guest today is Linda Orban, and she's a certified change management professional with 25 years of global experience leading through organizational change. Hi, Linda. It's so great to have you here today.
Hi, Andrea. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Well, your busy schedule, I feel great that we were able to get you on the show.
Yes.
So thank you for taking time out to speak with us.
Thanks.
So we've got some really great topics to cover today, and I'm really excited to share Linda's expertise with our viewers. So we'll be talking a little bit about the role of leaders in implementing that change, right? And then secondly, we'll talk a little bit about behavioral expectations and some pitfalls that leaders can be looking out for whenever they're going through a major transformation in their organization. And then finally, we'll be talking about the role of mid-level managers in igniting change that sticks in the organization. So, Linda, let's just dive right in. So one of the things that you and I have discussed at length is really how in organizational change, that really starts at the leadership level and then it gets filtered down as it gets adopted throughout the organization. So tell us a little bit more about what that looks like and how leaders really position themselves to implement that change.
Sure. I think it's very important for leaders to start with the vision. You need to start with the end in mind. We talk a lot about words like mission and vision, but what's really important is that leaders are able to paint the picture of what the future will look like. Starting with the end in mind and backtracking, being sure that it's very clear why the change is happening and what it really means. A lot of times leaders will say that we want to do something because it will benefit the organization, but that's where they stop. To really take it to that next level, it's important to say this is what the new organization will look like, or what the organization will look like with this new system or process in place. So it's really important for leaders to set the tone and to set the vision in order to make the change happen. So they really do ignite the change.
Well, I love what you said about they not only have to say why the change is going to happen, but how it's going to impact the people in their organization as well. So if they broadly say this is a change we're going to make, people don't know how that relates to them directly. So
it's true. And I've worked in all kinds of different industries: healthcare, energy, oil and gas, manufacturing, and I see this happen all the time, right? It's really important that leaders set the tone and they are explaining, no matter what kind of organization you have and no matter what kind of change it is, really take it to that personal level of what life after this is going to look like.
Exactly. I love that. Life after this,
Yes.
right? Well, when change starts to move down within the organization, there's always going to be some resistance to that change because people, whether they like it or not, they naturally gravitate to what feels comfortable, right? What's safe to them. And anytime there's a change, subconsciously we can perceive that as a threat. So talk to me a little bit about some of the behavioral expectations and maybe some of the pitfalls that leaders should look out for anytime they're trying to implement a big change.
Sure. What I've seen in my experience is that no matter the industry, people are the same and they experience change in a similar way. Even when a change is positive and done for great reasons, change is very hard for individuals. So leaders really need to anticipate how people go through change over time. And there is a process to it. It's based on the Kubler-Ross grief curve. But really it's about making sure everybody's along the way heard, listened to, and understands what's happening.
Okay.
There are different types of people that experience change. So there's a group who really vocally supports it and visibly supports it, and along the way are true champions. oftentimes, probably more often than not, you hear from people who are active resistors,
Okay.
who are very vocal, who really just, talk about the things they don't agree with.
So they're hardcore resisting.
Hardcore resisting, very vocal, and demonstrate resistance.
Okay.
It's important to listen to that group of people because they're true indicators of what they anticipate may or may not be working with a change. And then oftentimes there's a third group of kind of passive resistors, people who are quiet, really don't speak up, don't speak their mind, don't really indicate what they're thinking or feeling. And they can be kind of a dangerous group because sometimes they can, take the project down or, sabotage the things that we're trying to do for a good reason. So it's important to listen to them as well.
Great. So when you talked about the Kubler-Ross change curve, and if I'm remembering it correctly, it starts out with kind of shock or denial, right? So you may not even at first recognize that the change is actually happening. But then if the communication, which we hope from the leadership, is good enough, then you may go through, okay, starting out with shock and denial, and then maybe some depression because your environment's changing and you don't really know what to expect. And then what happens when that curve starts to come back up?
Yeah, it's interesting to watch. Not everybody makes it, but when the curve does come up, this is where you really start to see indications of alignment across those three areas.
Okay.
This is where most of the work has to happen. And if you don't get people up to the other side, you're going to lose some. Here's an example or a little story about where I actually saw this happen. So an organizational change in a company. The project was part of a true strategy within the company, but they went through an organizational restructuring. And one of the groups who at the time was supposed to be one of the key transformational strategic initiatives really got downsized quite a bit. One of their key leaders, their thought leaders and experts, was one to remain. But she really never understood what was happening or why, and she got to watch a lot of her very close friends and colleagues being exited from the organization. Mm-hmm. It was a perfect opportunity for leadership to really work with her and understand where she was on that curve, but she really never got out of the bottom of it. And eventually all of that experience and her, leadership, she had to exit the organization because she personally just couldn't make the change and she couldn't see the vision, and she just wasn't able to live in the new organization, the new structure.
Wow. So do you feel like that was kind of a miss from the leadership, that they didn't recognize that happening with her, and that they could have actually probably intercepted her at that point and really helped pull her up by explaining how the change was going to impact her and how she could really start moving forward had they known that? Do you feel like that was a miss on their part?
Yeah, I think that for leaders, really, we need to think about the individuals in the organization, and often leaders are focused on the business results, which is where they should be, right? And working at the strategic level, but really understanding where individuals are at a certain point in time in a change. And we invest in our employees, and we really spend the time to grow them and review their performance. And it's a shame to watch somebody exit an organization who really was there and brought, individual expertise. So that's just an example of what may happen if leaders aren't truly leading along the way and sticking with it. And also understanding and forecasting behaviors and where people can be over time.
Wow. I think that's a great point, and I just want to call that out again. And that's really the role of leaders, to be cognizant of the emotional side of change, and that people will experience change in different ways. For some people, they're gung-ho, they understand the vision, and they're on board immediately. But then you'll have other people, to Linda's point, that may resist that change, very verbally and actively resist that change. But it's important to give those people a voice, because they will be your indicators of things that may or may not be working with the change, which will allow you to make changes where necessary. So give those people a voice. And then the last group are those that are kind of passive resistors. And I love the way Linda described that. They may not be articulate enough to be able to explain how they think or feel about the change, but they're also resisting the change. And it's important to acknowledge those people and to have the managers really work with those people to help move them up that change curve. Because ultimately, to Linda's point, what will happen is if they don't move up the change curve, then we will end up losing those associates as they will probably exit the company. And some of those may be your best employees. So I think that's a great point, Linda. The last thing that we were going to touch on is the role of mid-level managers and how they're really the key people that are responsible for igniting change that sticks. So talk to us a little bit about what that means and how mid-level managers can really help implement a change within the organization.
They're really, that's the group that really makes change stick and stay, and they're the ones that have to own the change going forward. So if leaders set the tone, the vision, the what and the why, the managers are the ones that own the who and the how. Because
I love that.
It happens in their group, and they are responsible for part of the business performance, but the personnel performance or the people performance. So they are really the ones that, it sounds silly, but need to give people permission to change. It's a very simple thing, but just releasing people to go take new training that's required, or letting people go attend some type of town hall or watch a video online to learn more. Giving them permission really is a great way to give them everything that they need to make the change real and to make the change, to own the change going forward. So that's really a key group, and it's important to make sure that managers are experiencing change just as well as others, and that they are the ones who go through it first. They have information and communication first. They're able to talk about what's going to happen in the future and make it at more of a department level or more of a group level, so that they can make the change whatever they need it to be in the future.
I love that. So just reiterating your point, because I loved what you said about managers help, first of all, give permission to make change. So they may be the ones that really inspire the associates because they are the closest connection. So we admire our leaders, we look up to our leaders, we look to them for vision, but we always look up to our direct managers for support and for inspiration. So that person is really the one that's giving the permission. They're also the one that's explaining the how and the what. I believe you said the how and the why.
And the who.
And the who. So I think that's a great point, that's kind of their key responsibility, and really that it's a long-term commitment from the mid-level managers, because as that person moves through that change cycle, this doesn't happen overnight, right? I mean, we wish it would. It would be great if it did. But when we go through change, because it is such an emotional cycle for us, it may take time. And some people may move through that S-curve a lot quicker, and others may move through that S-curve a lot slower. And so the mid-level manager really has to be committed to making sure that they are working with their teams as they go through that change. And that may take months, right? And
yeah, I mean, here's what we know is over time, organizations change.
Yeah.
And especially now, there's such a focus on being agile and doing things in smaller portions to move faster. Well, really what that does is it adds a level of complexity and reprioritization. So a change that was launched 6 months ago, a lot of other changes may have rolled out since then. And so where something was the key priority, over time lessens in priority. That's when it really is up to the managers, those frontline managers, to make the change stick and to make it a part of the day-to-day ways of working.
Right. I love that. That's a great point. Well, just to recap, is there anything else you wanted to add on that last point? If not, I'm going to kind of just recap real quickly what we covered. Is there anything else?
Go ahead and recap.
All right. So today we really covered the role of leadership in positioning change within the organization, and how leaders are really responsible for explaining the vision, communicating what the future state is going to look like, so that people can get on board and really help support that future vision. The second thing we talked about is behavioral expectations and what leaders can expect as people are moving through change, and kind of the three groups of people that really go through change. So you have the people that are on board, they're your immediate champions or advocates of the change. And a lot of times those will be the group that you want to help pull the other two groups along. Your second group are your active resistors, and these people are usually verbally and actively resisting the change. But it's important to give them a voice, because they will give you feedback that you will not find anywhere else about what's working and what's not working with the change. And the final group that Linda covered is really your passive resistant people. And those are the ones that, for whatever reason, are not articulating what they think and feel about the change, but they are resisting it. So they're not moving forward the way that you need them to move forward. And it's important that we pay attention to all three of those groups and that we help support them throughout the change. The final thing that Linda talked about was really the responsibility of mid-level managers to help ignite change that sticks within the organization. So they're the long-term, really, if you think about them, they're sort of the long-term associates within the organization that are going to support the teams and the departments as they go through the change. Well, Linda, thank you so much. This has been excellent. Really appreciate you joining us today. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we hope you'll join us again on the next one of Life After This. Thank you.